Some nights feel ordinary until you look back and realize they were the hinge your whole life swung on. For me, it was that New Year's Eve. My name's Malik Carter. I am 29 years old. The courtyard was quiet except for the faint whistle of the wind between the buildings. Strings of holiday lights blinked lazily from balcony railings, fighting against the winter dark. Inside my apartment, the heat was up, the music was low, and the smell of takeout hung in the air. Fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens. We'd been running errands all day, laughing in the car, teasing each other over what playlist to use for the party. It was me, my girlfriend Tiana, and my older brother Darius. Two of the closest people in my life. If you told me then that by sunrise, one of them would be gone for good, I would have laughed in your face. We stepped outside to kill a little time before guests arrived. The courtyard had two oversized hammocks swaying gently, each one big enough for two. I dropped into the first, expecting Tiana to follow. She didn't. Instead, she walked to the other one and climbed in beside Darius. I told myself it was nothing. That's what you do when you trust people. You fill in the blanks with the best possible reason. But even now, years later, I can still feel that split-second hesitation in my chest, the way the air seemed to change, like something small and sharp had been dropped in the middle of the night. I didn't know it yet, but a fuse had just been lit. And before the year was over, before the night was over, it would burn through everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and blood. I'd spent the last year piecing myself back together after a breakup that nearly hollowed me out. I was working steady hours at a logistics company, stacking paychecks, avoiding trouble, and keeping my circle small. My girlfriend, Tiana Moore, she was the opposite of me in almost every way. 27, Baltimore-born, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and have every head turn without trying. Ambitious, sharp, but her moods, they shifted like wind patterns. Calm one day, a storm the next. I'd learned to ride them out, telling myself that love was supposed to be messy sometimes. Then there was my brother, Darius. 28, quick with a joke, quicker with a scheme. No 9 to 5 to tie him down, but somehow he always had money for a new jacket or a night out. We'd grown up close, survivors of the same house, the same neighborhood, the same long nights wondering how to get out. But with Darius, you could never tell if he was coming to help you or coming to help himself. That night was New Year's Eve, 2016. The three of us were together in my apartment. Music low, drinks poured, the TV in the background counting down the final hours of the year. If you'd walked in, you'd have seen nothing but smiles. You would have thought it was just family, just love, just another night worth remembering. But looking back now, I see it all differently. The little silences that hung too long. The way Tiana's eyes kept shifting toward Darius when she thought I wasn't looking. The slight tension in my chest that I wrote off as nothing. It's strange how your body sometimes knows the truth before your mind can catch up. I didn't know it then, but that was the last night before everything I thought I could trust shattered. Before I learned that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. It can come from the very people who share your table, your blood, your bed. We were in that golden hour when everything feels possible. The fridge was loaded, bottles lined up like soldiers ready for duty, condensation already gathering on the glass. Takeout bags from the little Caribbean spot down the street filled the kitchen with the smell of jerked chicken and fried plantains, the kind of scent that made you feel like the night was already worth it. I could hear the faint pop of caps coming off bottles, the shuffle of feet across the tile, the laughter from the others as playlists bounced between old-school R&B and something bass-heavy enough to rattle the window frames. It was the type of pre-party buzz where you feel light, loose, and just grateful to be exactly where you are. I carried a couple of bags out to the courtyard, the air warm enough to cling to your skin. Two hammocks hung side by side, swaying gently in the evening breeze. I claimed the one on the left, letting it take my weight with that soft creak of rope. I turned my head, waiting for Tiana to slide in next to me like she always did. But she didn't. She crossed to the other hammock, the one where Darius was already leaning back, his arm lazily stretched along the edge, an unbothered grin on his face. It was such a small thing, maybe nothing, but my stomach tightened the way it does when you notice something you wish you hadn't. I let out a laugh, too casual, too easy. It's nothing, I told myself. Or at least that's what I wanted to believe. From where I lay, I could see her laugh at something he'd said, her head tilting just enough for her braids to catch the light, to sound bright and unguarded. Darius had that way about him, a kind of charm that made people skip the part where they figured him out. He didn't have to try hard, and maybe that's what bothered me. He could make her comfortable without the history, without the weight of everything we'd already been through. When we got back inside, the food sat unopened on the table between us, but the air had already shifted, and I kept wondering if I was imagining it, or if the night had just taken its first turn. The door kept swinging open with that little metallic squeak, each new knock bringing another wave of faces, voices, and the smell of cold air from the hallway. Inside, the music thumped low but steady, one of those playlists you build for the background, but that still makes people sway without realizing it. Someone laughed in the kitchen, another voice called out for shot glasses, and the colored bulbs I'd strung earlier were casting soft blues and reds across the walls, turning the place into a kind of makeshift lounge. I moved through it all with a drink in my hand, smiling, nodding, refilling cups, trying to be the glue holding the room together. Every so often, I caught her in my peripheral vision, Tiana, just over by the couch, head tilted in conversation with Darius. It wasn't anything dramatic. No lingering touches, no whispered secrets. Just small things. A lean closer than necessary. A hand that brushed his arm when she laughed. The way her eyes seemed to lock with his for a second too long before darting away. It's easy to tell yourself you're imagining things in a room full of noise and movement. Jealousy makes fools of us, right? But in that moment, I didn't know if I was the fool or if I was watching something quietly being set in motion. The energy in the apartment was warm on the surface. Laughter, clinking bottles, someone doing a bad impression of a celebrity. But beneath it, I felt something unsteady, like a missing note in a song you've heard 1,000 times. You can't point to exactly what's wrong, but you know it's there. It happened fast, but not in the way danger usually feels fast. It was quiet, creeping. I remember lifting the glass, the way the condensation stuck to my fingers, and the faint clink when I set it back down. The music in the background was muffled now, as if it were coming from the other end of a tunnel. My eyelids felt heavier than they should after just 2 drinks. Not tipsy, not relaxed, heavy. My tongue didn't seem to move the same way when I tried to say something, and the sound of my own voice came out slower, dragged down like it had to swim through molasses to reach the air. I could feel each blink, as though closing my eyes for even half a second might be a mistake I couldn't undo. Somewhere in that fog, my mind reached for a memory I'd buried without realizing it. The first time I brought Tiana here months ago. Same drinks, same dim light, same easy laughter that faded into nothing. I woke up hours later back then, no recollection of how the night had ended. We laughed about it, blamed it on my low tolerance. I told myself I was just tired that night. That's what you do with small, uncomfortable things. You joke them away. You put them in the back of your mind and close the door. But that memory was here now, pounding on that door, and it didn't feel like a joke anymore. I looked at Tiana, searching her face for some recognition, some flicker that she felt what I was feeling. She smiled faintly, told me she'd have another drink, and then come to bed. Her voice didn't sound concerned. It didn't sound like she was seeing the same red flags screaming inside me. And Darius, he didn't say a word, just kept moving in the kitchen, eyes avoiding mine. I could see him glance toward the counter, the way someone checks to make sure a secret is still exactly where they left it. The heaviness in my body deepened. I told myself to stand up, to test my balance, but my legs didn't respond right away. The room wasn't spinning. It was sinking. The walls didn't move. I did. Each breath was an effort. I knew my body well enough to know this wasn't alcohol. And that's when I felt it. Not just fear, but a sharper, colder realization. I was about to lose control, and I didn't know what would happen after that. That's the last moment I remember clearly before everything shifted. I came slowly, as though surfacing from the bottom of a deep and murky lake. The room spun in wide, lazy arcs, and every sound reached me through a thick layer of cotton. Somewhere in the distance, muffled laughter pushed its way into my fog mind, too loud, too warm for the hour. My eyelids felt heavy, reluctant to lift, but when they finally did, the dim yellow light from the living room spilled across the floor in an uneven stripe. Shapes moved inside that glow. Shapes I knew. Shapes that should never have been tangled together. Tiana was on Darius's lap, her hands cupping his face like it belonged to her, their mouths pressed together with the kind of ease that told me this wasn't their first time. For a moment, my body forgot how to breathe. My chest tightened until it felt like my ribs might crack from the pressure, and a heat built behind my eyes, so sharp it was almost blinding. My mind tried to rewrite the image as I stared at it, tried to insist it was some trick of the light, some drunken misunderstanding. But the rhythm of their movements, the way her fingers curled into his hair, tore through any lie I could tell myself. I wanted to shout, to rage, to pull the night apart with the sound of my anger. But when my voice came, it didn't roar. It cracked. I told them both to get out, each word landing like broken glass, sharp but fragile. They froze, their faces shifting between guilt and something that looked dangerously close to indifference. That hurt most of all. There's a special kind of pain when betrayal wears a familiar face. It's not just the act. It's the realization that the people you trusted most didn't just cross a line. They built a new life on the other side of it, and they never planned to invite you in. Morning came without the comfort of rest. My eyes burned, my head still heavy, not from sleep, but from the weight of every thought that refused to loosen its grip on me. I didn't wait for explanations, for apologies, for some half-truth meant to soften the blow. I ended it with Tiana that morning. No theatrics, no drawn-out speeches, just the quiet certainty that the woman I thought I knew no longer existed. And Darius, his number, his presence, his name, all of it was cut off like a diseased limb. But even as I shut them out, the sickness they'd left behind stayed rooted in me. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, I began pulling threads I had ignored before. That first blackout, the one I brushed off as exhaustion, maybe too much to drink, it wasn't random. It wasn't harmless. She was there then, too. Same timing. Same aftermath. The pieces rearranged themselves in my mind, each one sharper than the last, until the picture was too clear to ignore. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd crossed into something far darker. And in that shift, my pain began to change shape. Heartbreak had a dull ache to it, the kind you could almost grow accustomed to. But this was deliberate harm. This was someone deciding, moment by moment, to strip away my trust, my safety, my control. My sadness was evaporating, replaced by something hotter, heavier, more dangerous. I thought distance would starve the pain, but instead it sharpened it, gave it edges. Each day, the sting of betrayal became less about loss and more about clarity. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was harm. Calculated. Intentional. And harm deserved an answer. I started paying attention in ways I never had before. Not from conversation, but from the quiet corners they didn't know I could still see. A glance at a mutual friend's tag photo. The familiar curve of Tiana's car in a parking lot. The way Darius's pattern of Friday nights never changed. It was like watching a puzzle reassemble itself. Piece by piece, their lives came back into view, except now I was on the outside, studying them like a stranger with a private ledger. In the past, I'd have walked away and let time do the dirty work of healing. But this time, something different grew in me. Something that didn't care about time or healing. I began to wonder if they thought I'd disappear quietly, carrying their secret like a wound no one could see. I wondered if they laughed about it. I wondered if, in their minds, they had already won. That thought stayed with me at night, lying in the dark. It sat on my chest and whispered that justice, real justice, wouldn't come from moving on. It would have to be made. And so, without fanfare, without even admitting it to myself at first, I began the smallest, most deliberate steps toward evening the scales. Keeping my distance not out of mercy, but out of preparation. I kept my distance, but never far enough for them to be truly alone. Darius had patterns, the kind of lazy habits people fall into when they think the world's too busy to notice them. Thursday nights at the same dive bar off Oakland Avenue. Saturday mornings hitting that backroom card game. cash changing hands and quick flicks. Even the way he stopped at that corner store for the same cheap whiskey, like a man who'd already resigned himself to mediocrity. I took note of everything. Who he owed, who avoided him, who smiled too quickly when they saw him coming. A man's debts tell you more about him than his words ever will. Tiana, she had settled in. Their little apartment became her stage. Every filtered photo and act in the play she wanted the world to believe. Poses with Darius's arm around her waist, captions about real love and fresh starts. I could almost laugh at how easy it was for her to pretend. But the thing about stage happiness is it's fragile. It only needs a small nudge before it topples into chaos. That's when the real work began. Anonymous messages that hinted at things Darius didn't know. A sighting here, a whisper there, enough to make him wonder if she was faithful, enough to make her think someone was watching. I didn't need a lie. Truth, carefully placed, is more dangerous than fiction. And I placed it like a surgeon, clean and precise. I passed him on the street once, by design, not accident. I didn't say a word, just kept my eyes on Tiana a moment too long, let her catch the weight of it. Darius noticed. The smallest crack in their facade opened that day, and I saw it. That's the thing about pressure. You don't need to kick the door down. You just find the weakest hinge and push gently. I didn't have to touch them. Not yet. The real satisfaction came from watching the doubt grow. From the outside, it would look like nothing. But I knew the fractures were spreading beneath the surface. It was only a matter of time before something broke, permanently. I remember the night I decided to stop just watching. Observation had been useful. It gave me control, gave me information, but control without action is just a slow death. I sat in my car with the glow of the dashboard light, painting my hands, drafting the words that would start the unraveling. I didn't even need to make them believable. I just needed them to hit the exact pressure point where trust turns into suspicion. The message was short, almost careless. Saw Tiana at the lounge last night with some dude. Thought you should know. No name, no proof, just the right amount of poison slipped into his bloodstream. I sent it from a prepaid phone I'd bought 2 weeks earlier, one of 3, each with a different number. No patterns, no links. The moment the message left my fingers, I didn't feel guilt, just a calm certainty. Like clicking the first domino and knowing the rest will fall. I positioned myself 2 tables away at a cafe I knew they liked, already sipping coffee when they arrived. I didn't have to wait long. Darius's face was tight, jaw working like he was chewing glass. Tiana smiled at first, then her brow furrowed as his voice got louder, his hands moving like he was trying to catch something invisible between them. I heard fragments. Don't lie to me. I know what I heard. You think I'm stupid? Each one sharper than the last. She denied it, laughed at him like he was paranoid, and then, just like that, her chair scraped back, the legs screeching against the tile, and she walked out without touching her drink. I stayed still, my head tilted just enough to watch him stare at the door long after she'd gone. That's the thing about pulling strings. You don't just yank them. You measure the tension, feel how they respond, know exactly how much pressure will make them strain without breaking. Too little, and nothing moves. Too much, and it all snaps too soon. But just right? Just right makes them dance, and you get to watch as they wonder if they're still moving on their own. In that moment, I knew this wasn't about hurting them all at once. This was about building a stage where they destroy each other while I stood in the shadows, making sure the lights never went out. I knew Darius's world was built on borrowed time and borrowed money. All it needed was a push. So, I made a quiet call from a number that couldn't be traced, tipping one of his more aggressive creditors to exactly where he could be found. I didn't have to embellish. Darius's debt spoke for itself. That same night, I imagined a knock at his door, the low, tense conversation, the kind of threats that didn't need shouting to be understood. He wouldn't know it was me. Not yet, but he'd feel the walls inching closer. Tiana's feed began to tell a different story. The polished, over-curated photos gave way to grainy shots with captions that felt half-hearted, brittle under their own weight. Phrases like, "Some people change," and "Not everything is as it seems," slipped between her selfies like static in a song. It was the language of someone starting to see cracks they didn't want to admit were there. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a moment, just a flicker, when I wondered if I'd pushed too far. When the memory of his face in that living room came back, the smug curve of his smile, the way he looked at me as if I were already beaten, it burned away the doubt. I reminded myself that this wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. This was a ledger being balanced, and the numbers still didn't add up in my favor. Each move I made wasn't just about hurting him. It was about reshaping the air he breathed, making every day a little heavier, every choice a little harder. The pressure wasn't there to crush him all at once. It was there to cook him slowly, until even his own reflection started to feel like an enemy. They say silence can be the loudest sound, and in Darius's world, it began to roar. Friends who once slapped his back and shared his table now avoided eye contact. Group chats fell quiet when his name appeared. The whispers I planted weeks before had grown into roots, twisting into every corner of his social life. They weren't just avoiding him. They were rehearsing how to pretend they'd never known him at all. I could see it in the way old acquaintances crossed the street, in the way people he'd once helped wouldn't even return a nod. Tiana's world wasn't faring better. The once carefully curated snapshots of champagne glasses and rooftop dinners on her Instagram were replaced with dimly lit selfies at 2 a.m., captions that sounded less like triumph and more like someone trying to convince themselves they still mattered. No familiar faces in the frame, no celebrations, just shadows and the faint glow of street lamps outside her window. Her circle had shrunk, not by choice, but by the slow erosion that happens when your name starts to feel like a liability to the people around you. It was almost poetic, watching them both drift further from the safety of numbers, into the kind of loneliness that makes you start talking to yourself just to remember what your voice sounds like. I knew the slope they were on, and I knew exactly how steep I'd made it. But there's a strange moment in revenge, a sliver of hesitation, where you catch yourself wondering if the satisfaction you're chasing will still taste the same when it's just you left standing. That moment came for me, uninvited. But then I remembered the living room, the way it smelled of betrayal, the sound of laughter that wasn't meant for me, the casual cruelty in the way they didn't care if I saw it. That memory was a match, and hesitation burned to ash. When someone takes something from you, is it wrong to take back more? Or is it the only way to balance the weight?